Hey everyone, what's going on? It's 2 Minutes to Review. It's Matt.
And it's Zach.
This episode brought to you by Lucky 13 Beard Co. We're going to give you a code later on in the episode to get 10% off of all your beard bombs and oils. But more on that in just a little bit. We know why you came here. Well, it's not for the jokes, it's for Megadeth.
Missed opportunity to start off this episode with the classic Sweating Bullets intro. But anyways, you clicked on the episode. You know what we're reviewing: Megadeth's brand new album, The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead. I have to do the exclamation point because they literally have it in the title. It would be wrong if you didn't do that. But I'm really excited to review this for a lot of reasons. I mean, forget the fact that it's Megadeth, one of the best metal bands out there. But if you are an avid listener of Epic Footnote Productions, which I hope you are, please subscribe to our channels. You would recall that back in 2020, Matt and I got to speak to a little individual known as David Ellefson. And what was really particularly interesting about that interview is that it was right before the band started recording this album. And he was talking about how excited he was for the album, how it was giving him a lot of Rust in Peace vibes when they were working on the material. Like, he was getting really excited to record this album.
And we didn't talk about a sex tape at all.
I'll get to the awkward part of that interview in a second. But roughly a year after we spoke to him, unfortunately, Mr. Ellefson found himself in a bit of a sticky, no pun intended, situation involving a fan.
That's what she said.
Yep, a female fan. A lot of accusations were thrown out there. And while it's still kind of muddied waters and everything, it actually led to Dave Mustaine not only kicking David Ellefson out of the band, or to put it more nicely, to part ways with his longtime bassist, but to actually go back and re-record all of the bass parts with the legendary Steve DiGerio. I'm sorry for mispronouncing that name. You know me. If you listen to our episode, you know I can't pronounce names for crap. But I mean, Steve is a legendary extreme death metal bassist. I mean, he's currently in Testament. He's played in Death. I mean, literally, you name the project, he's probably been a part of it. He's an incredible bassist. So that is exciting that he's on it. But it's just kind of like, holy crap, to re-record a whole already done album like that, given the circumstances. I mean, that's pretty intense. So, I mean, this is definitely an album that's been long in the works and a lot of anticipation around it.
All I can say about this is, I think it's time we do the review.
Oh, you just want to get right into it then, huh, buddy?
Yep.
But you know what, Matt? Because I'm in a really good mood, I'm going to let you go first.
All righty.
So, let me know when you're ready, buddy. We'll get the official Epic Footnote timer ready and going once you give me the cue.
Let's do it.
Longest review in under 2 minutes wins. Ready, set, go.
So while this album was in the can for a while and was reworked and it took forever to come out, and here we are, it should have stayed in the can a little bit longer. This album, quite frankly, for me, falls short in a lot of areas. This album has a lot of kind of weird quirks on it too. So the first one I kind of want to talk about is Ice-T's inclusion on this album, and then kind of sounding like Megadeth wants to do Metallica's Master of Puppets in Life in Hell. They have this really weird breakdown in there for absolutely no reason. And then the breakdown from Ice-T, it's kind of weird. There's like a couple random stops in Sacrifice and a really strange drum that's randomly used throughout the song too. And if you ever heard Pneuma by Tool, kind of like the drum that Danny Carey uses in there, it's in here, but very weirdly placed, and it just feels kind of odd. And Dave Mustaine's vocals, I feel like they don't sound like they can keep up with the speed of the music anymore. Like when they start chugging along, Dave sounds fine. But then to match the speed of what Megadeth does on a lot of the earlier tracks, it just doesn't sound like he can keep up. And then the title track, it really sounds like it lacks oomph, and it lacks just something in there that makes the music sound inspired. It sounds a little tired, in my opinion. If you told me that this album started at track 9 and ran through track 12, and it was a 3-song EP with an interlude, I would have been okay with it.
Wow. Time's locked in. So out of 5 stars, Matt, what would you give this?
It's listenable. It's produced fairly well. Two.
Wow.
There's just a lot of inconsistency on here, in my opinion. And I was running out of time, but I can mention it now because I'm not on the clock. um, there's
Well,
just
don't
go
go too
ahead.
down the rabbit hole, only because we might end up having a fun discussion after my review. That's all I'm going to say.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. All right. So I guess you want to go now, huh?
I mean, I kind of do.
3, 2, 1, go.
I got to completely disagree with Matt on this one. I mean, I actually thought it sounded really well produced. I thought it was actually some awesome metal that you'd want to hear from Megadeth. I thought Mustaine actually sounded better than he has in a long time. I actually love the song Night Stalker. And I actually, well, yeah, on paper, it could have been a misfire. I actually think Ice-T sounded really cool on that song. I mean, if you were a fan of the album Dystopia and thought it was a nice return to form after a lot of the just lackluster albums that they released in the early 2010s, I mean, you gotta love this album. I actually think it takes it a step further. I mean, you just got songs like We'll Be Back, Life in Hell, and Killing Time that I have a hard time believing that most metalheads, let alone Megadeth fans, wouldn't enjoy. I just listening to it, I'm like, oh wow, that's just some really tight, killer, ferocious sounding metal. And I got a lot of Rust in Peace vibes from it too. I mean, like we mentioned before, when we spoke to Ellefson, he even hinted that there was kind of that vibe to that. I was really, really impressed. I mean, granted, Megadeth has definitely disappointed a lot over the years, not just in the past few years. But this one, I really have to believe that if you love Megadeth, despite all the drama that surrounded this album, as well as just Dave Mustaine in general, you're gonna love this album too.
And with that being said, star rating out of 5.
4. I'm gonna,
Oof.
and the only reason why I give it a 4, I wouldn't give it maybe even a half an extra star. I will admit there are 2 songs that got a little cringy for me, and not because music. It was not because of the musically, but the songs "Junkie" and "Mission to Mars." I couldn't take hearing Mustaine talking about junkies and drug use, and also wanting to be an astronaut going to space.
Okay.
Seriously, like
So
those songs were cringy to me. The rest, I was really impressed with. But please,
okay. So let's start out with this. You mentioned Junkie. I'm going to mention Killing Time because Killing Time's lyrics sounded like they could have been written by somebody who literally just figured out how to play music.
I love that song.
I hated that song.
Oh, I thought that song was just a killer, like good mix of just in your face metal with a little bit of melody and groove. The lyrics didn't bother me as much on that one, whereas Junkie was just like clearly about like, all right, wonder what influenced this, drugs.
And see, I think the album really just picks up with Soldier On, and then through the end of the album is really good. My favorite track on this album is Celebutant, and it actually, for me, feels like the most composed and produced the most headbanging moments on the entire album. And with Soldier On, I feel like they channeled their inner strapping young lad to produce a really great song that I think is just missing out from the rest of the album. Like, I thought in the top half of the album that Dogs of Chernobyl could have been really great until his vocal style didn't match the very beautiful opening that they put together. It sonically sounded incredible, but his voice and his quote growling just didn't mesh.
And to me, I disagree. I actually thought it didn't mesh better than I expected to, because to your point, the last few albums, it definitely was noticeable that he doesn't have the same vocal strength that he did in the 80s and 90s. But I actually was really impressed with how well his vocals were, or at least maybe some production was done on it in the back end. But I actually thought it was really well done. I Night Stalker, I actually am still blown away by how good that is. I think that's probably the highest I've heard him in a long time. Granted, it's not classic Mustaine high vocals, but I actually thought, so I was really impressed with how well sonically he did in all those songs. And I think the song that you mentioned was actually really awesome. It was cool to hear like it again, Rust in Peace vibes to me. which, if you recall, back in an old episode of You Have to Pick Three, was one of the albums that I named as the best of 1990. Sorry, little plug.
So let's talk about Mission to Mars really quick.
Well, that song sucks.
It's weird.
It's weird. That maybe that sucks is not the right word. It's weird, and I would argue that musically it's good, but something I had to look it up and be like, wait, is that a cover of some 80s punk band that they're trying to do a metal version of? And no, it was written by them.
I actually thought that it was some way, somehow a tribute to David Bowie. I couldn't place it anywhere else. Like, why is this a song? Why are we talking about going to Mars and we're Megadeth? And
it was, well, that one was weird also because it wasn't like, this planet's gone to hell, let's just go to Mars and get it was literally like as if he was a young boy who was curious about going to Mars. Like, I'll admit that song is weird.
I was waiting for Ground Control to Major Tom.
Ground Control to Major Tom. Now, actually, I would love to hear that Megadeth covering that. That would be pretty damn cool, actually.
So I don't know. I think that there's a lot that could have been done to make this album better. I just feel that Megadeth, and I'll go on record as saying this, that I'm not giving Megadeth shit just because they're Megadeth and they're not Metallica. I'm saying this from somebody who loves music and enjoys Megadeth, and this is truly not one of their best pieces of work.
I wouldn't call it one of their best pieces of work, but I think it actually definitely stands out. I mean, I would argue that it's probably their best album since The World Needs a Hero, which admittedly, I am one of the very few people that actually like that album too.
And that's not saying much.
It's not saying much, but I mean, I think it's actually a really, I was really impressed. I actually thought, you kept making a lot of Metallica comparisons. I didn't actually hear a lot of Metallica comparisons.
There wasn't a lot.
I heard pure Megadeth. Like, I heard classic Megadeth. Like, it was really this is probably the closest I heard to Megadeth sounding like classic era Megadeth without trying too hard or trying to sound old. Like, it was like, I really do feel like this is an album that could be a great introduction for new fans of Megadeth, then who go back and listen to the classics.
Please don't do that to anybody.
I will happily. No. If you have not heard Megadeth and would like to be introduced to them, I will happily listen to this new album with you. Ugh. And then we'll go from there and be a lovely time.
And then I'll say I'm sorry, and then we'll give you a real Megadeth album to listen to.
Well, there'll be more Megadeth albums to come out to this, but that's how much I was impressed with this album. I actually think it's a great addition to their catalog.
Yeah, so much so that they led off with the last track, Will Be Back. So
that doesn't always say anything. If anything, that just proves how that's another thing. I would actually even argue that, to me, what makes an album really good is that when you think they chose the right singles, but there's still even more songs that they could release as singles and it would be just as good. Like, there's some albums that are like, oh, that's the wrong single to have gone with. I would have gone with this. Or, oh, it's only the singles that are good. I think there's a lot of songs on here that could end up becoming part of the band's set list, which admittedly, interestingly enough, the band has yet to actually perform any of these singles live. So that'll be interesting to see which ones they play live and how they translate live too, because let's be honest, Mustaine isn't as great sounding as he used to be live either, but I would still see them live again. I've seen them more times than I think I realize or can even count. Have you ever seen them live?
I did see them live. I think that was with Dream Theater.
A long time ago. The first Gigantor.
Yes.
I saw them on the third. I think the first time I saw them live was on the first Gigantor. I saw them on the same Gigantor with Lemmy a few years later after that. Saw them at Mayhem Fest. I saw them with the Big Four when they did the Big Four show at Yankee Stadium. I feel like, has it really? No, there's got to be a time after that I've seen them. I'd actually love to see them live now with Dirk playing drums with them now. I don't know if you're familiar with his background, but he's actually done some albums with Devin Townsend, but he's more known for his when he was in Soilwork. And I actually thought on this album he sounded amazing. I thought the drums sounded amazing. I thought Kiko and Mustaine's guitar work was phenomenal. I think that was another thing too. The album Collider, which I think we can all admit was a big, the guitar work on that was just so bad. Whereas this one's like, wow, they really sound in sync. Like the solo sounded awesome, the riff sounded awesome.
Musically, absolutely, it's a fine album musically, but there's certain areas that it doesn't work. Like the title track, it just sounds like it.
Super Collider is the album I was referring to before
Okay.
everyone starts judging me. Sorry, continue.
So the music is fine. It sounds good when it sounds good. But like I said, the title track, it lacks something. It just seems like it's tired. It doesn't seem like Megadeth they were really interested in playing that song. To me, like I said, the last 4 tracks, maybe Mission to Mars is a little questionable, but I think that's where they do their best work on this album.
And I actually think that throughout the album, it's the most invigorated Megadeth has sounded in a long, long time.
I'm sorry.
Well, you know what? I guess it really doesn't matter what we actually think. What really matters is the times. Let's find out who gave the longest review in under 2 minutes. Matt, would you like to know your time?
Go for it.
Matthew, you came in at 1 minute and 48 seconds.
And that's why I'm really good at this game, because you came in at 1 minute and 28 seconds.
Oh, I was under.
Yep.
Huh. I normally go over. Oh, well. We want to hear from you. Do you agree with Matt? Do you think this is a stinker of an album that Megadeth should be embarrassed by? Or do you agree with me in that this is a sign that Megadeth still has some gas in the engine? Let us know on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Epic Footnote. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel to hear more episodes like this, as well as a few cool videos, and maybe even that interview I was talking about with David Ellison way back in 2020. And once again, thank you so much to Lucky 13 Beard Co.
Log on to lucky13beardco.com. Put anything in your cart, including our brand new Lemmy-inspired beard oil, bourbon, tobacco, cola, and leather. It smells absolutely incredible. And don't forget to use the code EFP10 at checkout to get 10% off of everything in your cart. Lucky13, the number, beardco.com. Use the code EFP10 at checkout.
Thanks so much for listening, and we hope you join us for another episode real soon.
Sweating bullets.